My name is Taki Uchiyama. I'm from the Panasonic Corporation. I work at their Product Security Center and work on the Product Security Incident Response team. I've been in the security industry for about 12 years. In a past life, I worked at the National CERT in Japan, working on awareness in cybersecurity.
I'm Sean Richardson. I'm the technical lead at Palo Alto Networks. I run the Product Security Incident Response team. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and previously I worked at Microsoft working in their response center as well. So today we're going to talk to you about how do you keep yourself safe. We've heard about all the bad guys, the bad actors who are trying to potentially break in the nation states and some of their motives for trying to break into computers. And so now we're going to give you a couple of simple tips on how to protect yourself out in your organization. So Taki, what's one of the most important things you think folks can do to keep themselves safe on the internet?
So one thing that attackers do is to try and attack old software with vulnerabilities. So one of the things that you can do to protect yourself is to update your software that you're using, for example, your operating system and the applications that you use to the most current version that are presumably have less vulnerabilities in the software versions that are available.
Well, and sometimes those are things that can automatically be downloaded on your computer, but sometimes you have to go out and fetch them.
Yes, depending on your corporate network settings, you may have to actually go out and download the most recent version and install it yourself. So enable automatic updates when you can, but if for some reason you're not able to automatically fetch the updates, make sure you periodically check for applications that need to be updated.
And also keep in mind, this is not just for your computer or your laptop, it's also for your mobile devices. If you think about, a lot of folks have all of their contacts, they may have their documents, they may have access to their computer, might even have their credit card numbers on there. So it's also very serious and very important to keep those updated to the latest updates and the applications as well.
Yeah, and an important thing to consider is now with mobile being such an intricate part of our lives that our computers and our mobile phones have essentially the same information. So your phone is just as critical as far as the type of information that it holds. So you want to keep it as updated as possible.
And Taki, I know a lot of times when we hear of a company releasing new updates, they'll mention, oh, there were 10 security bugs that were fixed in this. But I think an important thing to remember is that might not be all the security bugs that were getting fixed. Those are just the ones that they're going to talk about.
Yeah, and that's something that in what we call security advisories, they list 10 vulnerabilities, but there's also little things that they're probably fixing that they're not mentioning. So you want to make sure that you're updating to the most recent version so that all those things are being addressed.
All that goodness baked in.
Yep.
So Taki, what's another thing that folks can do to keep themselves safe?
So one thing we talk about is keeping backups available in case an incident occurs and your information is being corrupted or something like that. So if your system is somehow corrupted and unable to be used, you want to make sure you can revert back to an update that you've recently taken.
That's actually a very good point. I have a cousin back in the United States who's a dentist, and she had, one of her assistants had clicked on a link, unfortunately, and they ended up getting ransomware.
Oh.
And unfortunately, she didn't have systems backed up, so she couldn't see patients, she couldn't go about and do her normal daily business, and it was pretty tough.
Yeah, and in the corporate world, there's a bunch of news articles, you could probably Google for them, on corporations being infected with ransomware where they had to revert to backups, or in some cases they actually paid the ransom to get their information recovered.
That's a good point. So keep those backups. So Taki, I know each year the industry produces a list of the top 10, top 100 passwords that are getting hacked. Mm-hmm. How do you make sure your password's not on that list?
So we talk about strong passwords all the time. One of the things that we try to talk about is to include not just lowercase letters, but also capital letters, symbols, numbers within your password to try and make it complicated and less easy to brute force, is what we call it, the practice of trying to brute force your password, trying to use all kinds of combinations to compromise your password. But in making your password more complicated, the thing that comes with it is it becomes very hard to remember that password. Anything you can talk to about that?
Well, my mother at home, she'll write down her passwords in a little notebook, and that's fine and good when you're at home and behind locked doors and no one's wandering through your house. But in organizations and corporations of that nature, keeping passwords written down is a bad plan.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk with your admin to see if they recommend any password storage software that will make it so you only have to remember one really good hard password,
mm-hmm.
and then you can store all your rest. But I would check with your organization and see what they recommend doing. I think the important thing to remember is that passwords are very important. It's the keys to the organization.
Yeah, and keys to your information as well. And so one thing that I've recommended to some users is to use not what's called a password, but what's called a passphrase, which is a longer version of a password, which is a combination of a few different words, 2 or 3, 4 different words within the English dictionary, and combine them together to make a longer password.
You could even use like lines from songs.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And just something, and it doesn't have to be random, but it just has to be long enough that it's not on that list where it's not as easy to figure out that you're using that passphrase.
So no admin 1, 2, 3, 4.
No, or what we call the QWERTY password, which is the first line across your keyboard.
I think the important thing to remember is that the bad guys are trying to get your password. So the harder you can make it for them to guess it or to break it, the safer you're going to be in the long run.
Oh, and then just to add on the notebook thing that you were talking about before, the web browsers have the ability to be able to store your password.
Is that a good idea?
I don't think it's a good idea. I would never do it myself personally. I don't know about you.
I wouldn't either. Sometimes you end up sharing computers with folks, and you may be giving people access to things you're not intending to. So always best to not use that option. Although it makes things look a lot easier, it's not quite as safe a thing to do.
I'm glad you agree with that.
But sometimes we get those emails. And it's, you've won $1,000, or, you've got a package that's being delivered and you need to click on a link to make sure it's going to the right address. What do you do in those situations?
So the first thing that I always say is to just exercise common sense. You never just randomly win $1,000. It's just way too good to be true. So you want to make sure you verify where that email is coming from. Is it coming from a place where you would normally receive an email from? That's like the first thing that I would say. And then you check the link, make sure it looks like a legitimate link.
Well, it's not always, it's good news. It can sometimes be bad news. It can be a fake email saying that your bank account is going to be closed or your credit card's going to be cut off. So it's not always good news, but if your bank is going to be sending you an email, most legitimate businesses will be either giving you a phone call or sending you written word if there's a problem with your account, not just relying on an email.
Yeah, and common sense states that if there is an emergency with your bank account, they're not going to try and contact you via email. The quickest way to get a hold of you is they should have a phone number on record, so they'll probably be phoning you first.
Well, I actually had an incident where somebody had written into me about a delivery that needed to be returned, and they wanted me to click on this little receipt that was in the email. And I wasn't somebody who handles that sort of thing. So I went out to the website on my own, not through the link, and went through to see what their process was and figured out who I could reach out to verify that this was a legitimate email. And I called them and said, I've received this, and is this accurate? And they're saying, yes, it was. So it was a good way to make sure that before I clicked on anything that it was accurate. But I think it's always best to, if you're not sure, get that second opinion.
Yeah. And you can ask people around you. You can ask your security team, support team, to verify the email and the sender.
But sometimes you might have clicked on something anyway, and maybe it was a mistake, maybe it wasn't.
Maybe it wasn't, but...
What do you recommend in those situations?
I would recommend, if you're within the corporate network, just to contact your security team or your network security team or your corporate security team, whatever it's called. But contact them via email or by phone, just letting them know that you may or may not have clicked on something that was malicious or something along those lines. Just to let them know that something may happen with your computer, let them know your IP address, or if they know your username, they'll be able to trace your network activity.
It may sound a little embarrassing to admit you've made a mistake or that you've clicked on something and you might worry that you might get in a little bit of trouble. But time is of the essence if something was malicious. Your security team, your admin is going to need to know that as quickly as possible so they can stop the spread of any malware or any viruses getting into the rest of the corporate network. So if you aren't sure or you do think you clicked on something bad, definitely ask for help. Call your certs, let your manager know, whatever the process is. And actually, that's a good question. A good thing is to mention is corporate and organizational processes. Many places have established rules on how you should use the computer, how you should use the internet. If your organization says to use a VPN and never click on links, be sure you're following all those good best practices. They're there for a reason.
And when you don't follow them and you click on a malicious link, then nobody can guarantee whether you'll have a job tomorrow. But all joking aside, you want to make sure that you're following those rules because they are in there, like you said, they are there for a reason, and you want to make sure that your corporate information is not getting sent out to random places like attackers that are trying to obtain them.
Attackers are going to do anything they can to try and trick you into clicking on a link or responding to an email. They are trying to break into your systems. So follow any good best practices that your company or organization has set up, and hopefully we've provided you with a few more things to keep your eye out for. Anything else, Taki?
Nope.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for listening to us. Thank you from Scotland, and have a good day.
Thank you.